When you study the book of John, you can't help but come across this phrase, I am. In fact, this phrase was uttered by Jesus all through the book. And here are 7 of his I am statements. In chapter 6, verse 35, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. In chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. In chapter 10, verse 7, I am the gate. In verse 11, I am the good shepherd. In chapter 11, verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. In chapter 14, verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And finally, in chapter 15, verse 1, I am the true vine. So when you read these statements, I think you can't help but, realize that that's how Jesus wanted to identify himself. And yet, each I am statement has a slightly different meaning from the other. There's obviously a lot of overlap. But as you study each of these statements, it'll take you deeper into understanding who Jesus was and still is. Now, there is another statement that's also scattered throughout the book. And it's this statement, I am not. So on the one hand, you have Jesus saying, I am, but there's another phrase that's also used, and it's I am not. So we're going to focus on both these phrases for the whole of this sermon. But first of all, I'm going to talk about the interplay of these two phrases between John the prophet and Jesus. And then later on, we're going to focus on the exact same two phrases between Peter and Jesus. So first of all, let's look at the way John the prophet and Jesus use these phrases. Both the phrases I am and I am not, by the way, is mentioned about 100 times in the book of John. Isn't that amazing? And earlier on, right in chapter 1, the book starts off with John the prophet saying, I am not the Christ. That's in chapter 1, verse 20. And then in verse 21, he says again, I am not Elijah, and I'm not the prophet. Verse 27, I am not worthy to untie the straps of his sandals. Then in chapter 3, verse 28, John the prophet says, I am not the Messiah. Now, isn't it interesting that the book starts off with John saying repeatedly, I am not. They asked him, are you the Christ? He said, I'm not. Are you Elijah? I'm not. Are you the Messiah? I'm not. So as he makes his I am not statements, it's as if he's getting all the readers to get prepared to accept the I am statements from Jesus. So, is there a lesson here for us when we see how John the prophet used the phrase I'm not, and then Jesus repeatedly using the phrase I am? And I believe there is a lesson for all of us just from that. Perhaps the lesson is just this. The rest of us must say, I am not. And only Jesus can say, I am. Just think about that. if you build on that, there is a lesson here on discipleship and on lordship. I mean, let's face it. Who really is the Lord of your life? Can Jesus say, I am the Lord of your life? And can you say, like John the prophet, I am not the Lord of my life? Until you can say, I'm not the Lord of my life, then Jesus can't say, I am the Lord of your life, or I am the light of your life, or I am the bread of life. You have to first of all say, like John the prophet, I am not. So I want to ask you, brothers and sisters, when it comes to major decisions in your life, or deciding on your priorities, do you base it on the teachings of Jesus? Or do you just look religious on the outside, but actually in your heart, you make all the decisions based on your own philosophies and on your own preferences and your own likes and dislikes? In other words, you are truly the Lord of your life. But no one else can see it, you see, because no one really knows the basis of your decisions. But if you really allow Jesus to be the I am, then you will take yourself out of the equation. You will say, I am not. And I think the words from John the prophet is so appropriate when we think about this in terms of discipleship and lordship. You know, come to think of it, many of the sins that the Bible mentions really comes down to this one thing: a desire to please ourselves. Isn't that true? I mean, virtually every sin is a result of us wanting to please ourselves. It's a result of us saying, I am the Lord of my life. I want to do what I want to do. I want this pleasure. I want this experience. I mean, let's go through some of the sins. Evil thoughts. That's a sin. But you know, when we have thoughts that we allow to get very, very far, when people hurt us, we say what? I want justice. I want revenge. I want to pay back. I want it my way. What about the sin of sexual immorality? Why is that such a rampant sin in the world today? Because behind that sin, what's the driving force behind that sin? It's this: I want pleasure. I want to enjoy myself. I want to please myself. What about the sin of theft? How does that get translated? Basically, it means this: I want this for myself. I don't want to work for it, but I want it. What about the sin of greed? Basically, it's us saying, I want more money. I want, quote unquote, the good life. You see, so much of the driving force behind each act of sinful nature is an incredible desire to please ourselves. And to borrow the words from John the prophet, we would do a lot better in life if we can understand that at many times in the day, we need to use this phrase, I am not. I'm not going to put myself above God. I am not going to enjoy this for my own selfish need. But when you become the I am of your life, then things take a turn for the worse. Because then everything is about you putting yourself at the front. And what happens to your life as a result? It just doesn't go well. So, brothers and sisters, I think there's a lesson here on lordship. We need to allow Jesus to be the I am. Like John the prophet, we need to say, I am not. I am not the Lord of my life. And if you can let that take root in your heart, I think we will be a lot further along in our faith. You know, making Jesus the Lord of our lives, or letting him be the I am, is not easy. And you know, one of the things I love about the Bible is this. It never says being a Christian is easy. You know, when you talk to salespeople, they always tell you the good side of a certain product that they want you to buy. Isn't that true? I just got a call arbitrarily from a reputable company, and that was talking to me about their insurance products. And they were telling me all of the benefits. You know, you're going to get this, and it even covers COVID-19. It does this, and they went through all the benefits. And I thought to myself, then what's the catch? What's the catch? Usually you won't know what the catch is until you buy and until you face a tragedy in your life. Unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of people. But you know what I love about the Bible? It's this. Jesus never said from the get-go that life is going to be easy. That's why I can trust the Christian faith. Jesus is not selling us something where he only talks about all the benefits and the challenges are never highlighted. That's not what it says. When you really understand the I am statements, basically what that means is Jesus is the Lord of your life through thick and thin. It doesn't matter what happens to you, he is the Lord of your life. And yet for many of us, is he truly the Lord of our lives when we go through a challenge? Or is he just the great I am in good times? I'll tell you one thing I've learned after being a Christian right now for about 37 years. Sometimes challenges will come and they'll last for a short time. But for some of us, we will face challenges that will last a very long time. And when those times come, I'm telling you, your faith will be tested. You know, in about 2003, when we were going through a lot of crisis as a movement and as a church, there was a lot of stress. And something started to happen as far as my wife's health was concerned. You know, she started to develop rashes on her skin. And at first we didn't, think very much of it. But as time went by, it started to spread. And then Karen got it diagnosed, and then the doctor told her that she has psoriasis. And, psoriasis can be extremely challenging. There is no cure for it. And when certain things triggers you, your skin just flares up, and it's extremely, extremely uncomfortable. And then on top of that, she had to be very careful about what she eats. And from that time on, I remember things just changed in our lifestyle. Prior to that, we could go to any restaurant, eat anything. After that, I had to learn one thing. I can only go to restaurants that serve the kind of food that only Karen can eat. That actually caused me a lot of frustration. There are times I'll get so annoyed. And I remember praying to God, God, okay, you've let her have this. Okay, it's been long enough. Can you take it away? Here's the thing. I wish I could tell at the end of the story, Karen is completely cured. But you know what? She still has psoriasis. How many years has it been? It's been a long time. And I realized, you know what? God's probably doing that to teach me some things, to teach Karen some things. And the one thing I know I've learned through all this is this. Learn to think a lot more about what Karen needs. Learn to not just think about what you want. When you want to find a place to eat, don't just think about what you want. It may be a small thing, but that has been a huge thing for me. I am not going to decide ultimately what I want. I have to really take Karen's feelings into account. That's what I've learned. Now, I want to ask you this, brothers and sisters. Do you have an ongoing challenge that have stayed with you for about a decade, maybe even longer? How do you feel? Is Jesus still the Lord of your life? Are you still as fervent as ever before? If you falter in times of trouble, and by the way, we all do, but there has to come a point where we have to just pick ourselves up. Are you with me? And I know challenges can get us down. We've all we all have been tripped, but there comes a point where you have to just stand up, because the question is this: if you're only going to make Jesus the Lord of your life when times are good, then think about it. That's like saying to God, I just want to be on your side so that life can be good. Now, how do you feel if someone uses you or wants to be close to you or wants to be your friend because they know by doing so another door will be open for them? You thought they liked you for who you are, and then finally you realize, oh my goodness, they're using me. How does that make you feel? I know I don't like that feeling when I get that. How do you think God feels being used? God, thank you so much for this. Oh, you blessed my life with all this thing. But then one day when he gets taken away, all of a sudden we lose everything. We don't want to be close to God anymore. You see, that's the real test of who is the I am in your life. Let's borrow that phrase from John the prophet and apply it during these difficult times and say, I am not the Lord of my life. All right, now let's move on and talk about the interplay of those words between Jesus and Peter. Now let's turn right now to chapter 18 of the book of John, starting in verse 2. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priest and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, Who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they said. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go. Interesting. I never realized this before, but notice how clearly Jesus used this phrase, I am. John records it 3 times. I am, I am, I am. Clear. No ambiguity. I am Jesus of Nazareth. Now, later on in that same chapter, let's read in verse 25. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was standing there warming himself. So they asked him, you aren't one of his disciples too, are you? He denied it, saying, I am not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. Didn't I see you with him in the garden? Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment a rooster began to crow. Now, look at this incident. What did Peter say? It's interesting how John phrased it. 3 times now, Peter says, I am not. I am not. Earlier in the chapter, 3 times Jesus says, I am. So when we see the interplay of I am and I am not between Peter and Jesus, this time, you know what we realize? We've got to emulate Jesus. And if there is a need to take a stand for our faith, if there is a need to take a stand for our values, we need to just come out courageously, like Jesus, without ambiguity, and say, I am. But sometimes we falter under pressure because of fear, because of perhaps a desire to please others. And then we say, I am not. I am not. Only to regret it. You know, this reminds me of a story of my son when he went to camp, when he was recruited for the national service. You know, like all parents, we were in anxiety, you know, wondering how he would do. Because, as you know, especially brothers, that things can get pretty rough, okay, as a young recruit. And after several weeks, David came back and, you know, his hair was all shaved. And I asked him, and he said, Dad, I've never been tested like I have been during this time. And I asked him to tell me what happened. And he said, the thing is that every day in the morning, when we have to wake up super early, I got up half an hour earlier and I did my quiet time. But he said that was not the hardest part. The hardest part was when we all were about to go to sleep. We will be having all kinds of trash talk. And the whole camp started to debate with me on whether or not, you know, I should have sex before marriage. And that whole subject came out. And everybody in that area, in that dormitory, went after David. I don't think that they didn't have a fight or anything, but you know how boys would talk, and they would talk about why he should do it and how dumb he was for not doing it, and why would he want to hold on to that position. You know what is so amazing is that I was very, very proud of David. David took a stand right till the end. He never compromised. He had to come out in the open and say, I am a Christian. I am. And sometimes, brothers and sisters, we have to do the same. And I think under pressure, we sometimes get silent. And we say, well, I didn't say I am, but I also didn't say I am not. And you're in the middle. I just got to tell you, if you're silent, you basically said, I am not. If you're tempted to lie at work, cut corners, I want to encourage you, come out, speak your mind, do so respectfully, and let your Christianity shine. Taking a stand and going to church, that's something you all need to do. The Bible expects us, in the future when the measures ease up and we get to meet, I hope we'll all be there because we love God and that we're willing to take a stand against people who don't hold on to the same values. You got to come out and say, like Jesus, I am. So, brothers and sisters, how are you doing in this area? How are you doing in this area? I want to close out with a story about an early church father who lived in the mid-2nd century. His name was Polycarp. And history says that he died around 155 to 160 AD, okay? Or maybe even a tad earlier. But he was a leader of the church in Smyrna, which today is located in modern-day Turkey. Now, I'm going to read you, okay, excerpts of this ancient text that was written about how he gave up his faith. And he came out in the open and declared who he was. So here are the excerpts, okay, of what people believed he said. When they captured Polycarp, they tried very hard to get him to deny Christ. But this was what Polycarp was recorded as having said. 86 years I have been his servant, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? Once more, the proconsul urged Polycarp to swear by Caesar. This time, Polycarp replied, since you pretend not to know who and what I am, hear me declare with boldness, I am a Christian. And if you wish to learn more about Christianity, I will be happy to make an appointment. Furious, the proconsul said, don't you know that I have wild beasts waiting? I'll throw you to them unless you repent. Polycarp answered, bring them on then, for we are not accustomed to repent of what is good in order to adopt that which is evil. According to observers, they then lit up the flames They tied him to a pole and they lit up flames around him. But interestingly enough, the flames did not consume Polycarp's body as expected. So the fire circled around him, but his body did not burn. And since the fire did not have its intended effect on Polycarp, an executioner was ordered to stab him to death with a dagger. And his blood extinguished the flames. Wow. I am a Christian. That's what Polycarp said. I want to ask you right now, brothers and sisters, are you proud of having that name? Christian. Do you wear it? Do you hold on to those values? You know, I am a Christian. Do you profess it when there is a need? Now, I'm not saying we profess it without being invited, and I don't think that's helpful. That could turn a lot of people off. But trust me, as you lead your godly life in Christ Jesus, you will be called upon to profess your Christianity. And I hope in those occasions you will say, like Jesus, without ambiguity, I am. Thank you, everybody, and I hope this lesson has been helpful to you.